Attention all players of Magic the Gathering. I have grave news. There's a horde of masked menaces invading your game, and they're doing so in the upcoming Spider-Man set. In just a few weeks, you won't even be able to have one lousy commander night without seeing one of those vile vigilantes sitting across from you. But don't panic just yet, for I, J. Jacob Jameson, am here to help you prepare. Now, as we all know, the most common place you're gonna find those webheads is crawling around those casual commander tables on Friday Night Magic. But to catch a criminal, you have to think like a criminal. And that's why I hired this dork right here. I brought him in so he could tell you his top 10 commanders that he hates from the new set. He'll talk about what standout cards they're likely to include in the 99, what their game plans are, and all of that other junk to help us prepare for this cavalcade of spider savagery.
Wait, what? That's not what the ad said. You asked people to submit the top 10 commanders we think are great from the new set.
No, we asked you for the top 10 commanders that you fucking hate from the new set.
Oh. Did you know dyslexia tests can take up to 6 to 8 hours for adults?
Can it? Alright, just read your damn list. It's fine, we'll do it live. Fuck it, we'll do it live! And you better do it well or you're not getting a dime of your paycheck.
Wait, I thought this was an internship. We get paid?
Just shut up and read! Goddamn Gen Z workforce.
Okay, let's get started. Hi, I'm Jacob, welcome to Deep Dive MTG, and welcome to my top 10 new commanders from the Spider-Man set that I'm looking forward to. If you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. We're a small channel and it helps out a lot. You'd also be contributing to Gordita's Treat Fund.
Her hunger is ceaseless.
Now, before I start listing, there are two specific commanders in the recent leaks that I want to address first. Those commanders in question are Gwenum Remorseless and Electro Assaulting Battery. Now, I know every playgroup has their own standards for Rule 0 when it comes to power and gameplay, but this is my list, and I feel like these two just fall a little too high in power for my tastes. One of these commanders arguably feels like an upgraded Burgi, and the other one just feels like a guaranteed Bolas Citadel in the command zone. Are there ways to build CDH or borderline CDH commanders in a casual manner? Any answer other than yes in this case would be hypocritical. But even then, you'd have to jump through some serious deck building hoops to make either of these commanders feel casual. At least for how I define casual. And even if the payoffs you try to run aren't that strong, if these commanders function how they are designed to do so, each of your turns will feel like a game of solitaire. So for me, no matter how you slice it, I just don't have interest in building either of them. But if you disagree or think there's a more interesting way to build them, then leave a comment and let me know.
Get in the comments!
Anyway, now that we got those two out of the way, let's move on to the list. In my number 10 slot, we have Spider piloted by Penny, aka Penny Parker and her Psychic Spider. You know, the one she taught to pilot Neva. Penny and her Spider pilot are a 5-mana Azorius legendary artifact creature Spider Hero 4/4 that has Vigilance, and on ETB you put a 1/1 counter on a target creature, and whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. You could take this commander in a few different directions since the keyword modified isn't just counters but auras and equipments as well. Given her colors, one strategy I find particularly interesting is Blink and 1/1 counters, since a good number of standout cards for those game plans can be found in white-blue. Cards like Essence Flux, Soul Herder for a big beater, and Raynar the Ever Watchful, since when you blink your commander, he'll make a flying creature to put the 1/1 counter on from your commander's ETB, which in turn facilitates your card draw. Also, I have a soft spot for trying to meld two strategies that normally don't go together, like 1/1 counters and Blink, since those counters wouldn't actually stay with your creature if you blink it. Finding a way a deck can work with these two separate strategies in a way that really feels cohesive is interesting to see, so I can't wait to see some of these penny brews. Okay, so moving on to our number 9 slot, and that's Spider-Man 2099. He's a legendary Spider-Human Hero 2/3 for a red and a blue, and he has the caveat that you can't cast him during your first, second, or third turns. But he comes with Double Strike, Vigilance, and at the beginning of your end step, if you played a land or cast a spell this turn from anywhere other than your hand, he deals damage equal to his power to any target. Normally, I'm fairly wary of having removal in the command zone since it can paint a pretty big target on your back, but in this case, since it's only on your end step, it feels fairly restricted that you won't catch too much flack. Truth be told, it's kind of hard for me to pin down how they want you to build this guy. It seems to lean into this sort of Power Matters Voltron burn damage commander with the added benefit of blue to protect your commander. Cards that either significantly boost up his power or give him Death Touch is going to make his end trigger ability a guaranteed piece of removal for pretty much any creature. Speaking of Death Touch, with a card like Basilisk's Collar, you'll also gain a chunk of life for when he activates. A few must-includes include Tavern Brawler, the Reality Chip, and Haste Magic, all of which have synergy with the commander that seem pretty self-explanatory. Although another interesting direction you can go with him is trying to make as many clones of your commander as possible to see if you can really catch your opponents with that burn damage. A couple of specific cards to help facilitate this are Spark Double, Go-Go Mysterious Mime, and Chameleon Master of Disguise. That last one getting a few bonus points for being on theme. Next, in our number 8 slot, we have a very fitting placement, that being Lady Octopus, Inspired Inventor.
They just couldn't stop at arachnids, huh? We let these yahoos put octopus people into our game.
Wait a second, MTG already had plenty of tentacled individuals before this set.
Interns don't talk back. Now keep reading.
Okay, mild concussion aside, I love this commander's design. Yes, we're no strangers to seeing mono blue artifact decks, but this commander embodies two aspects that I just absolutely adore. One is a low CMC commander that you're able to recast for very little, and the other is a strategy that encourages you to deck build in a way that would let you play out your cards on curve. Let me explain. This card is a legendary human scientist villain 02, and she says whenever you draw your first or second card each turn, you put an ingenuity counter on Lady Octopus. So because you keep needing to cast higher and higher CMC artifacts, this commander encourages you to naturally build a good mana curve. Also, her ability, unlike what you'd expect, is not sorcery speed, meaning that this is not only a way to cheat the mana cost of certain artifacts, but you're also able to cast them with flash, basically. Not to mention, her ability to add counters from you drawing cards doesn't say only on your turn. So if you run a few cards with incidental card draw on opponents' turns, it'll actually give her more ingenuity counters. Now, when building this commander, there are a ton of auto-includes. And honestly, a lot of them are pretty obvious. It's mono blue artifacts. While your card pool might be more limited than usual, those cards hit like a truck. So I'm just gonna quickly go over what I consider the three main auto-includes that you just straight up cannot miss. One is a card from the new commander decks in Edge of Eternities, Surge Conductor. It's a 3-mana artifact creature robot, and it says whenever another non-token artifact you control enters, you proliferate. Yes, you will be mainly using this to proliferate your commander's counters. There are a few niche interactions where this could be useful. If there's an opponent at the table running Infect, or a more likely scenario is if you run Uthros Titanic God Core, the blue land from Edge of Eternities that requires you to put charge counters onto it, then you can use that proliferate to slowly accrue more and more charge counters. Speaking of Uthros, we're going to cover Uthros Research Craft next. It's a 3-mana artifact spacecraft, and if it has 3 charge counters on it, it gains the ability whenever you cast an artifact spell, draw a card. Then you put a charge counter on the spacecraft. Also, if you accrue enough charge counters on it, it becomes a big old flying beater, but we're mainly here for that first ability, since it means whenever you use your commander's ability to cast an artifact, you'll draw another card and therefore add another ingenuity counter. And for our third and final include, we have Mirren Spy. It's a 3-mana blue drone creature, surprisingly not an artifact creature, and it has flying, and whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may untap a target creature. I feel like this one goes almost completely without saying. This card basically makes it so that you're able to dump out your entire hand so long as the number of ingenuity counters is high enough. And if you manage to put a card on board that draws you a card every time you cast an artifact, this can just get insane very quickly. Not to mention, all of those game actions that I'm mentioning can happen at instant speed. Truth be told, the reason I'm excited for this card isn't actually because I'm planning to run her as a commander, but rather as a sub-commander in my Leonardo da Vinci deck. They both complement each other so well, since da Vinci's effect actually draws you a card interacting with her ingenuity counters. Plus, if you run da Vinci in the 99 of her deck, you can use him to cheat out any high CMC artifacts that she's not able to cast yet. I might also be a little bit biased on being excited for her, given the fact that I really liked her character's mannerisms in Into the Spider-Verse. She had that cheery yet threatening aura that only an uptight AP chemistry teacher could match. Oh, and before I forget, she's also a really good commander for you to run a lot of those suspend artifacts that don't really see a lot of play. Since her ability reads those as 0-mana artifacts, you can basically cast them at any point in the game that you're able to tap your commander. Cards like Soul Talisman, Mox Tantalite, and Lotus Bloom are perfect to slot into the 99. Alright, let's make our way down this list to number 7. In that slot, we have Gwen Stacy and her alter ego, Ghost Spider. Now, I know it might be surprising to some of you that I'd have her so low on this list, since not only is Gwen Stacy a beloved character of the Spider-Man series, but also just a banger commander design. But for myself, I already have a Cast from Exile deck that I'm really fond of, so I personally don't plan on building her. But despite that, I can't ignore how insanely cool this commander is. Here, let me show you. On her front side is Gwen Stacy. She's a legendary human performer hero for 1 and a red, and she's a 2/1. And when Gwen Stacy enters the battlefield, you exile the top card of your library. You may play that card for as long as you control this creature. Then, for 2, a blue, red, and white, you can transform her. And whenever you play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, you put a 1/1 counter on Ghost Spider. You can also remove 2 counters from Ghost Spider to exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. I love how the design of this commander gives you 2 avenues for a win condition. You can either store up your 1/1 counters to try and commander commander damage an opponent or two out of the game with a giant flying beat stick. Or if you need some advantage, you can spend those few counters to impulse dig into your deck. Once again, I have a list of 3 must-includes that I would highly recommend running in the 99. Those are Party Thrasher, Vega the Watcher, and Wild Magic Sorcerer. But let's start with Party Thrasher. He's not only a great source of early game value, but even in the late game, he can save you an enormous amount of mana by giving all of those exiled spells Convoke. All of that value for 2 mana just can't be beat. Honestly, I'm surprised this card hasn't spiked in price already. Next, we have Vega the Watcher. Vega is a legendary bird spirit with flying, and he says whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you draw a card. He costs 1, a white and a blue, and he's a 2/2. Honestly, what can I say about this card that isn't already abundantly obvious? He's a fantastic source of card draw, he's a flying blocker in a pinch, he falls neatly onto your mana curve, and you get all that value for just 3 mana. There is not a world where you build Gwen Stacy and not include this card. Next up, we have Wild Magic Sorcerer. He's an Orc Shaman 4/3 for 3 and a red, and he has the very simple effect to give the first spell you cast from exile each turn Cascade. He basically guarantees that whenever you cast that first spell from exile that you're going to trigger your commander again because you're going to be casting yet another thing from exile. Also, like Vega, he falls very neatly onto your mana curve. Let me clarify what I mean. Your commander gives you something to do on turn 2 and turn 5 guaranteed, thanks to her front side and her back side. Meaning that if you're running cards that cost 2 mana or 5 mana in this build, they better bring some serious value to the table. Serious value, like Party Thrasher, definitely commands. So Vega and Wild Magic Sorcerer being 3 and 4 mana respectively is just fantastic. And let me just throw my hat in the ring real quick. Out of all the current treatments we have of Gwen Stacy, this one is by far my favorite. The combination of the full art framing being held up by webbing and showing her jamming out on her drum set with said webbing is just peak. Alright, I've said my piece. Let's move on to number 6. And in that number 6 slot, we have the power couple of Eddie Brock and his symbiote soulmate, Venom Lethal Protector. Ah, some good old-fashioned Jund big creature sacrifice. Reviewing this commander for me feels like reviewing cookie dough ice cream. Is it my personal favorite? No. But will you ever see me complain if you slide me a bowl?
Hell no! I'm a mint chocolate chip guy myself.
Well, this metaphor's for me, not you.
Keep yapping, intern, and I'll get the chair again.
I'm reading. Eddie Brock is a legendary human hero villain 3/3 for 2 and a black. He simply says, when he enters, return a target creature card with mana value 1 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and for 3, a black, red, and green, you transform him. His flip side is Venom, Lethal Protector. For 3, black, red, and green, you get a legendary symbiote hero villain 5/5 who has menace, trample, and haste, and whenever he attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, you draw X cards, and then you put a permanent with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the sacrificed creature's mana value. Anyway, Eddie Brock presents a fairly unique building constraint, where you want all the creatures in your deck to either cost a boatload of mana for Venom, or just 1 for Eddie Brock. Normally, this would impede the efficiency of the mana curve in your deck, so to circumvent this issue, I recommend running 4 to 5 mana ramp spells to assure that you have something efficient to do on each of your turns leading up to casting/transforming Venom. While cards like Skyshroud Claim, Open the Way, and Traverse the Outlands do fit the bill, it's probably better to run a few creature versions of them as well, like Seed Guide Ash and Solemn Simulacrum, since they work with Venom's ability. When it comes to 1 mana creatures, you really want to focus on creatures that can sack themselves either turn 1 or turn 2 to give you some sort of value. Since cards like Haywire Might, while they are good, don't exactly fit within Eddie's game plan because you're planning to play him turn 3, and by that time in the rotation, there's normally not somebody who's played an artifact or enchantment that you really want to get rid of all that much. 90% of the time, you'd probably end up hitting an Arcane Signet and just feel like a jerk. So I think a more versatile card like Insidious Fungus fits a lot better, because if you play it on turn 1 and nobody's played anything egregious on turn 2, you can just simply sack it to play a land and draw a card. And then of course, on turn 3, when you play Eddie Brock, you can grab it back to the field. Now, onto the big creature includes. Most of the time, you're going to want to run some big boys that can discount their mana cost in one way or another. Some obvious ones include the new Bygone Colossus and Diamond Weapon, or even the OG Galta. As you can see, with this commander, you're going to be finding yourself running a good chunk of big vanilla beaters. That's why I think it's a perfect home for this card. Don't ask me to pronounce her name, because I'm not going to get it right. So I'm just going to refer to her as the Harmacist. Either way, the Harmacist slots very nicely into this deck since she's perfectly designed to recycle that chunky 9/9 into Venom's sacrifice trigger turn after turn. All of that recyclable value makes her more than a worthy include. All in all, this commander draws cards and cheats creatures from your hand into play. What's not to love? Alright, let's move on our way to number 5. For our 5th spot, we have Iron Spider, Stark Upgrade. He's a 3-mana legendary artifact creature spider hero with vigilance, and you can tap him to put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature and or vehicle you control, and you can pay 2 mana to remove 2 1/1 counters from among artifacts you control, and you draw a card. Now honestly, this card's effect isn't really all that complex or super interesting, but I like the challenge of trying to build a 1/1 counter deck outside of green, since a huge majority of all the good 1/1 counter cards are within that color. Not to mention, combining 1/1 counters and vehicles as a strategy is also pretty interesting.
Oh great, they even have AI, Spider-Man.
Sir, you realize that's not a drone. There's a person in there.
That's exactly what the liberals want you to think. One sec, I have to go tweet about this.
Right. Okay, moving on. Okay, so when you're building this commander, I feel like there are a few auto-includes that should go into any brew you make. A few of those cards include Surge Conductor, Steel Overseer, and Marvin Murderous Mimic. But those cards are so synergistic that I feel like I don't really have to explain why they're good in this deck. So instead, let's spend a little more time talking about some cards that might fly under the radar for this commander. Cards like Giggling Skitterspike. This is a 4-mana indestructible 1/1 artifact creature toy, with the important effect of whenever he attacks, blocks, or becomes the target of a spell, he deals damage equal to his power to each opponent. And given how much you're going to be buffing up all your artifact creatures and vehicles, this thing is going to deal some serious damage. Crystalline Crawler is another worthy include. This is yet another 4-mana artifact creature, except it's a construct, and this creature has the effect that it enters with 1/1 counters for each color of mana spent to cast it. While yes, we are a colorless deck, so most of the time that's going to end up being 0, there are a few ways we can circumvent this, but let's not focus on those. For the sake of argument, let's say we just casted this with colorless mana. At any time, you can remove a 1/1 counter from this creature to add 1 mana of any color, and the creature itself taps to put a 1/1 counter on itself. If you're able to double up on your commander's effect enough times, this becomes incredible ramp. Not to mention, even if you can't, it still has a way to put 1/1 counters on itself with its own ability. And lastly, let's throw in a Stone Coil Serpent. This is an artifact creature snake for X mana that starts as a 0/0, but he enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters. But what really matters is he has reach, trample, and protection from multicolor. He can either be a fantastic way to defend your life total, or to swing out at someone and deal a chunk of damage. And thanks to your commander, even if you don't invest a lot in him in the beginning, you can just make him bigger over the course of the game. But honestly, I haven't even mentioned the strongest part of his effect, and that's the fact that these 1/1 counters aren't limited to creatures. Like I said, they go into vehicles as well. Vehicles which are permanents that are notoriously hard to remove, since they can't be hit with any sorcery speed creature removal most of the time, and dodge 80% of board wipes. So the fact that you take that kind of evasive permanent and stack a bunch of 1/1 counters on it to make a giant beater is insanely powerful. So I'm more than excited to give this a try as my first colorless deck. Alright, let's move on to number 4. In that slot, we have Norman Osborn and his Dark Half, Green Goblin.
Leave me alone, please.
Hiding in the shadows. Hiding from who you truly are.
If we're going off of raw power, this one might be first on the list, not including our honorable mentions, of course. However, as I mentioned, this is a top 10 list for how much I like the commander, so Norman finds himself slotting very nicely into the 4th position. On his front side, Norman Osborn is a legendary human scientist villain 1/1 for 1 and a blue. He can't be blocked, and whenever Norman Osborn deals combat damage to a player, he connives. Then you can transform him for 1, a blue, black, and a red. His backside, Green Goblin, is a legendary goblin human villain 3/3 for 1 blue, red, and black. He has flying and menace, and he has spells cast from your graveyard cost 2 less to cast. He also has the ability Goblin Formula, giving each non-land card in your graveyard Mayhem. Mayhem cost is equal to its mana cost. The only restriction is that you may cast it so long as it was discarded this turn. This card offers you so much generic value that honestly, the world is your oyster in terms of win conditions. You can play him as a wheel-focused strategy, trying to bury your opponents and all the extra advantage you get from your Mayhem cards. You could play him as a discard strategy, where you're trying to get everyone at the table to discard their cards, you being the only one who actually gets to benefit and cast the cards that they discard. Or you could toss together some good old-fashioned Grixis Reanimator, since ideally you're going to be discarding and drawing as much as you breathe. And in order to reach that game plan, you're going to be playing a lot of draw discard cards as well as looters. Cards like Likeness Looter, Frantic Search, and Faithless Looting. These are cards that no matter which of those strategies that I've mentioned previously, you'll often see them for every list you have for the Goblin. Another couple of those guaranteed includes are Shadow of the Goblin, River Kelpie, and the Lost and the Damned. River Kelpie nets you more card advantage as well as Shadow of the Goblin, however Shadow of the Goblin offers the extra benefit of having a little bit of burn damage on it. And the Lost and the Damned is a very underrated enchantment from Warhammer that for a lot of strategies that don't cast from their hand can build you an instant board state in just a couple of turns. Oh yeah, one last auto-include that you definitely shouldn't miss is Archfiend of Ifnir. For a lot of draw discard decks, this card is basically a one-sided Toxic Deluge over the course of multiple turns. Not to mention the -1/-1 counters you put on because of his ability don't go away. And on top of all of that, he has cycling, meaning that you can cycle him, draw a card, and then with your commander you can cast him. This card is non-negotiable. If you're playing the Goblin, you gotta play the Archfiend of Ifnir. Alright, let's move on to number 3. The recipient of our bronze medal in this list is Jackal, Genius Geneticist. Jackal is a legendary human scientist villain 1/1 for a green and a blue. He has trample, and whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value equal to Jackal's power, you copy that spell except the copy isn't legendary. Then you put a 1/1 counter on Jackal. This commander almost reads like a challenge video prompt, because in a 100 singleton card format like Commander, it's extremely hard for you to ladder your way up your mana curve like that consistently. So he proposes a very unique deck building challenge that had me scratching my head the moment I saw him. Do I try to focus on 1 converted mana cost cost and run a lot of cards that allow me to remove counters in order to get value? Or do I play a deck with creatures with X in their mana cost in order to get whatever CMC I need at the time? The reason he's so high on this list is because I'm really excited to see how I can navigate this deck. And between all the strategies I've listed thus far, I still haven't really made up my mind completely. However, I will say my knee-jerk reaction just screams Hydras, but you can build them with a mix and match of any of those mechanics, not just zeroing in on Hydras. Speaking of Hydras, however, let's go over a few notable includes for this deck. Goldvein Hydra and Hydroid Krasis are a couple of slithery multi-headed boys that slot right into this deck, and while you're at it, you might as well throw in a twinning staff to double those heads every time you cast them. This might be a good time to remind the Magic fan base that anything that says double token creation doesn't actually work with this commander, since technically copying the spell that makes a token isn't actually creating a token. It's weird, I know, but just for your information, Adrix and Nev Twincasters does not work with this commander. A couple more cards that do, however, are Mockingbird and Ingenious Prodigy. If it wasn't obvious already, whenever you copy one of these X spells, the X of the copy will be identical to the original. So if you have a 5/5 Jackal and cast an Ingenious Prodigy for X equals 4, each of those copies will come in with 4/1/1 counters. Lastly, I want to talk about two includes that are a bit more situational depending on your build, but I think still have value in mentioning. The first is Owaka Traveling Merchant. This is a card from Final Fantasy that you can tap to remove a counter from a non-land permanent you control, and you draw a card. If you are trying to play the deck without a focus on X spells, then this guy gets a lot better because he can remove a counter if your commander's too big. However, most of the time, if you're trying to ladder through your deck, making X bigger and bigger each time, then Owaka kind of sets you back in a weird way. Next up is Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath. Uro's a classic. You cast him from your hand for 3 mana, you draw a card, you gain 3 life, you put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. But the real nice thing about Uro is after you copy him, the next time you would cast him, it would be for his escape cost, which is 4 CMC, making it the next link in your Jackal chain. The only caveat I'd include is if you're playing Uro in your deck, you're going to be wanting to run a lot of fetch lands. That way you're more likely to have enough cards in your graveyard in order to escape it. Alright, I think that's about all I have to say about Jackal. I'm excited to see some of the brews for this guy, but in the meantime, let's move on to number 2. In second place, we have Peter Parker, and his flip side, the amazing
Parker? They put him in this game? You know what? Good for him. Glad to see you had one card on this list that isn't some circus freak or a vigilante.
Oh, well, actually.
And I'm sure no information to the contrary will be revealed as I walk out of earshot.
Okay. As I was saying, this is Peter Parker, and his flip side, Amazing Spider-Man. I've gone over this card in a short previously on the channel, but for the sake of this video, let's cover him one more time.
Alright people, let's do this one last time. My name is Peter B. Parker.
On his front side, Peter Parker is a human scientist hero 0/1 for 1 and a white, and he says when he ETBs, you create a 2/1 green spider creature token with reach. Then you may pay 1, a green, a white, and a blue to transform him. He transforms into Amazing Spider-Man, which is a spider human hero 4/4 for 1 green, white, and a blue. He has vigilance and reach, and he gives each legendary spell you cast that's 1 or more colors web slinging for a green, white, and a blue, meaning you may cast those legendary spells for that cost so long as you return a tapped creature you control to its owner's hand. Needless to say, but 1 mana mana dorks work extremely well in this deck, since you can tap them both for the mana to cast into a web slinging cost as well as to be the creature to bounce back to your hand. Another aspect that I mentioned previously is the fact that web slinging as a mechanic can actually be used in a defensive way, where if you have a legendary spell with flash or give your legendary spells flash, you can return a tapped creature you control to your hand that's currently being targeted with removal. The bigger issue is getting those big threats that you control to become tapped when you need them to be. Luckily, with cards like Relic of Legends, as well as Inga and Asika, getting your big threats to tap in order to bounce them back to your hand for protection isn't that hard of a thing to do. And if you have a card like Gandalf the White either in your hand or on the field, you'll be able to flash in those legendary spells to do just that. Now, we've covered a few of the cards that allow this strategy to pop off, so let's talk about a few of those payoffs. Some of the more notable legendaries to cheat in include Galta Stampede Tyrant, the new Absolute Virtue from Final Fantasy, and the 6th Doctor, considering the fact that casting something for web slinging still counts as casting. However, there is one line of creatures that people who are brewing this commander have definitely taken notice of. I'm talking about the different Myojins. Honestly, I didn't know about these cards before I started recording this video, but now that I've seen them, they're not only crazy cool, but they're insanely good in this deck. These are a line of creatures that all have a similar line of text that basically reads that if you casted it from your hand when it ETBs, you put a divinity counter on them. While that divinity counter functions basically as an indestructible counter, each of them has an ability where you can remove it to get an extremely good payoff. The 3 in specific that I think are must includes are the Myojin of Blooming Dawn, the Myojin of Seeing Winds, and the Myojin of Life's Web. The Myojin of Life's Web allows you to remove the counter in order to put any number of creature cards from your hand into play. The Myojin of Seeing Winds allows you to remove that counter to draw a card for each permanent you control, and the Myojin of Blooming Dawn allows you to remove that counter to make a 1/1 colorless spirit token for each permanent you control as well. And specifically for Blooming Dawn and Seeing Winds, that doesn't say non-land. Hell, it doesn't even say non-token. So needless to say, all 3 of these for me are must-includes. Alright, I feel like I've sufficiently expressed my hype for our number 2 spot here. Let's move on to number 1. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. Deep Dive MTG's number 1 most anticipated commander from the Spider-Man set is Miles Morales! Okay, was this a surprise to literally anyone? Throughout this video, I really haven't hid the fact that I'm a huge Spider-Verse fan. So when I saw the reveal for Miles, aka Ultimate Spider-Man, I felt damn near contractually obligated to build him. And that obligation turned to excitement the moment I read this card. From the flavor of his camouflage ability making him turn colorless, to the fact that his triggered ability has synergies with both spiders and legendary creatures, all because his bite was the catalyst that created the Spider-Verse in this canon, and even the small detail that he's not Heroes tribal, he's Legendaries tribal, since Miles still has affiliations with some villains like the Prowler. All of those little details show just how much this card is oozing with flavor. So yeah, I took the main character from the most recent Spider-Man movie and made him number 1 on my list. What are you gonna do, sue me?
I will!
I'm sorry, what?
I give you a time slot on our show. I let you do your own top 10 list prompts, not even the one that I gave you. And this is the milquetoast finale you slapped me with. This basic, uninspired piece of... You know what? Give me a moment.
Alright, let's get through this number 1 slot before he comes back with something scarier than the chair. Miles Morales is a legendary human citizen hero 1/2 for 1 and a green. When Miles ETBs, you put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. And for 3, a red, green, and a white, you may transform him. He transforms into Ultimate Spider-Man, a legendary spider human hero 4/3 for 3 red, green, and white. He has First Strike, Haste, and has the activated ability Camouflage for 2 generic mana. You put a 1/1 counter on the Ultimate Spider-Man, and he gains Hexproof and becomes colorless until end of turn. And whenever you attack with him, you double the number of each type of counter on each spider and legendary creature you control. In essence, this deck is 1/1 counters and spiders/legendaries typal. It seems like there's 2 main avenues you can go down. You can either focus on generating a bunch of spider tokens that grow bigger on each combat, or you can focus on building up a board of value legends that also get bigger on each combat. Personally, I don't like bottlenecking myself with one theme over the other, so I figured I'd just handpick the best cards from each strategy and mash them together. Off the bat, I want to take note of something very important. Aside from Miles' front side, his card actually doesn't have an ability to give out the 1/1 counters himself. Yes, he can double them on each combat, but those creatures already have to have those counters in order for him to do that. So adding in cards that can assure that creatures have 1/1 counters when they enter or at other points in the game are extremely important. That's why I think cards like Sphere Grid, Rhythm of the Wild, and the new Spider-Punk are so important. They make sure that by the time Ultimate Spider-Man hits the board, that the creatures you have on board already have 1/1 counters. Plus, Spider-Punk and Rhythm of the Wild will keep those pesky blue players at bay. Now this is green, and we have a 6-mana commander. So of course, we're gonna want some serious ramp in this deck. For said ramp, I recommend Kami of the Whispered Hopes, Hamza Guardian of Arashin, and Kodama of the West Tree. Kodama probably being my favorite of the 3, considering he gives your creatures trample and gets you permanent extra mana through grabbing lands, as opposed to Hamza, who will probably net you the most amount of immediate mana, but he's also a lot more susceptible to removal since once he's gone, all that ramp is gone as well. And Kami's just nice to have because he fits nicely on your mana curve, and he has synergy with 1/1 counter strategies. For card draw, the 2 best engines you could probably get are Kutso Malamet Exemplar and the new Terra Symbiosis. And lastly, in terms of game closers, the 2 best that come to my mind are Sovereign Okanek Ahau, Tifa, Martial Artist, or Abzan Falconer. Abzan Falconer just giving your entire board flying, Tifa allowing you to go for extra combats in order to close out the game, and Sovereign basically being a second trigger of your commander. Except unlike Miles, he affects every creature on the board, not just legendaries. Oh, and before we finish, there's one last card that I have to insist you play. Folks, I cannot think of a better home for Arachnogenesis. The set even reprinted it for us, so it's not dummy expensive right now. You flood the board with all those 1/2 spiders, and the moment any of them get 1/1 counters, Miles will buff them up like he's giving them anchor arms. Then you can unleash your uncomfortably swole horde upon your opponents. Alright. Well, if there's nothing else, I think that concludes our top 10 list.
You hold it right there.
Where do you keep coming from? Is there a tunnel underneath that desk?
Shut it, you simpleton. I've let you weave your web of lies long enough. That's not the #1 commander from this set. That title belongs to the real hero of this story, the man of the people. That's right, I'm talking about J. Jonah Jameson, aka my long-lost cousin and legally distinct individual. He knows a menace when he sees one. A menace right there, and right there, and right there. And of course, the biggest menace of them all.
Hey there, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Once again, this is Deep Dive MTG, and if you want to hear me yap more about Magic the Gathering, Subnautica, or pretty much anything else, then subscribe and stick around. Catch you later.